This has been an extremely weird week for me. After a month where multiple complications have made me fall dreadfully behind schedule on my channel, I finally put together a Hearthstone theory script on the Rise of Shadows meta, and was all set to begin working on the video last Monday. However, that day was the precise day Blizzard announced the Rise of Shadows nerfs, which served to cripple Rogue and put a slight damper on the card of Lysiana. This forced me to scrap my script, spend the day speedwriting a newer, shorter one about the nerfs, and 24 hours later I was ready to start making this new vid. Then Blizzard announced that day that 18 cards from the boom-zooka project would be buffed. That's right, buffed. And everyone would be getting a new golden legendary that is actually pretty strong. So here I am, writing a third script now that both of my others have become dated material. My seething frustration aside, I have to ask the question, what the fuck is going on? We have very rapidly gone from a stagnant meta based around Tempo Rogue, Control Warrior, and generic mid-range decks, to unknown territory where Rogue is being shot down in some ways and shot up in others. What is Blizzard's goal with these changes, and why are they implementing these changes now? Well, let's find out. The meta after Rise of Shadows landed seemed relatively by the numbers. A few decks rose to tier 1 status, a collection of others also existed, and these decks all followed a traditional aggro mid-range control cycle. Tempo Rogue, the strongest aggro deck, fell to most decks from the warrior class, while those decks also had weaknesses mostly in the form of hunter. Other classes were able to sneak in a few other archetypes, but for the most part this trifecta was respected, and Tempo Rogue shined as the top deck overall. However, class win rates remained relatively fair, and less popular decks held the highest win rates, which meant that this meta was, at the very least, balanced. But we have two observations we can make about this status quo. First off, the decks that were on top were dictated by the Rogue class. Tempo Rogue was the most popular deck in the game, and with that deck being aggressively focused, the only way to consistently beat them was with the strongest control deck possible. Unfortunately, the Priest class currently sucks, which leaves only Warriors as a suitable counter. Hunter then shines thanks to their strength against Warrior, and all the other decks fill in the other design areas. At the same time, certain classes have proven unable to maintain themselves in this environment, most notably Priest and Paladin. While a deck or two existed for each of these classes, they have proven to be particularly niche choices in execution. This runs counter to what former game director Ben Brode has described as a perfect meta, one where each class has multiple decks, all around 50% win rates. Remember this, because this is important. With Rogue at the top, cutting down their strongest cards appears to be a perfectly rational decision. Raiding Party was the strongest card draw in the game, that also allowed for certain cards that often synergize to all be drawn at once. A 1-mana nerf simply lowers its power to be closer to balanced. The Evil Miscreant nerf is a slight hiccup and nothing more, which given its strength makes it almost seem like it wasn't nerfed enough. However, it's better to do too small of a nerf than too much of one, so I can't fault the decision. The Preperation Nerf, while unfortunate, makes sense. The original Prep saw play in every deck that was allowed to use it, and could generate some incredibly powerful swing turns. Cutting it down so that its user gets a 1-mana advantage over their opponent instead of a 2-mana one makes this equivalent in power to the old Innervate, with a few more limitations. So once again, a fair choice that succeeds in bringing Rogue down. That said, Rogue still has viable options, especially considering that other decks will rise in popularity now that they aren't being oppressed. This brings us to the card buffs. Every class is getting 2 cards from the boom-zooka project boosted in strength. These changes range from making Mulch Muncher cost 1 less mana, big deal, to pogo-hopper costing 1 mana, which might actually be a big deal. After all, Blizzard has been pushing to make pogo-hopper Rogue a thing since before the card was even released. Now they've straight up buffed it in an attempt to reach this dream. But it's not just the hopper. Unexpected Results is actually viable by itself now. Extra Arms has similarly become good, and Luna's Pocket Galaxy is now trying incredibly hard to be viable. Altogether, these card changes succeed at making some of the weakest class cards we got in the boom-zooka set actually work. But to what end are these changes being made? Examining just how strong each of these cards are becoming is like examining a single thread in a tapestry. It doesn't tell the whole story. What's more interesting is looking at how some of these cards synergize with others that haven't been seen play. For example, take Extra Arms and Xeric Master Cloner. This minion can actually prove to be somewhat powerful if played with adequate synergies, like this spell. The problem is that these synergies are few, and Extra Arms is currently too weak to manage in a viable deck. With this buff, however, that changes. Extra Arms is now perfectly strong by itself, being a more flexible version of Blessing of Kings. Thus, its synergy with the boom-zooka Priest legendary has the potential to shine brighter. Just a small disclaimer, I'm not saying that this deck will work, I'm saying that it might work. We're gonna have to wait until the changes actually come to see whether or not it will truly be viable. While not every single one of these buffs contributes to decks that don't see play, many of them do. There's the aforementioned pogo-hopper and the plethora of new options for it. The spell damage mage archetype might be able to find more ground now that unexpected results is easier to use. Hell, Dr. Morgan very well might make a big handlock a little more viable now that she isn't garbage when drawn. Meanwhile, major decks aren't seeing many buffs, with the exception of Mech Hunter and arguably Zoolock. But even these buffs are indirect at best, given the current variations of these decks. Put together with the nerfs, it appears that Blizzard is aiming to make many decks viable, aligning with their goals for the perfect meta that we discussed earlier in this video. I also have to commend Blizzard for their choice of timing. After just 1 week of the new single-player content being released, they now have new changes coming about as the rest of the chapters come to us. I tip my non-existent hat to you, game developers. I sincerely wonder if Blizzard will succeed at their goal to make this game more balanced and enjoyable for all players, all classes, and all decks. We'll just have to wait and see as these changes slowly come into play.